Good morning, everybody. This is Pastor Patti with your Tuesday morning check in for Tuesday, September 8th. Yesterday was Labor Day, so the church office was closed and I was home with my family, so I thought we'd bring you a check in bright and early this morning. Hope you had an awesome weekend and holiday with your family, and I hope you're all being able to be safe. Just before I start my devotion, a shout out to all the other school districts who are now going back, especially to my Dallastown friends and family and our kiddos here at the daycare. We're starting school in 2020 or 2020. It's going to be great. So go into it with a positive attitude and know that it doesn't matter how you're doing your schooling this year, you're going to rock it. So I thought about doing my devotion on Labor Day, and then I looked ahead to the end of the week and looking at plans that we're doing and realized that, wow, this is the first time in a long time I'm not going to get to teach kids about September 11th. And September 11th has probably been one of those moments in history for me that I will never forget. Just as we talked a week or two ago about times in history that some of you may never forget. And one of my driving forces is that we never, ever let this day go and forget what happened to our country and how it affected each of us and our families. So I want to do a reflection on that today. Starting with 19 years ago, this coming Friday at 8:45 in the morning, our lives totally changed forever. Now, I'm not going to tell you my story yet, but just, as you think about that day, it started when the towers went down. And that's when most of us, when the first plane went in, that's when we realized there was a problem. And not only did they have the issues and the problems in New York City, but we know the Pentagon got hit and people there lost their lives and were tragically injured. And Flight 93 that went down close to home for many of us in Somerset, Pennsylvania. It was a day and days of pure tragedy, but also it was a day that brought out for many of us the heroes that we can be looking to in our lives, or people who we can look at and say, you know, those are people that put others before themselves. Those were people who were in a horrible situation and didn't complain about the situation they were in, as so many of us are doing now. They just went in and helped and saved people, and sometimes at the cost of their own lives. I wanted to look at the heroes of that day. Some of the heroes of that day were those first responders, those firefighters, those police officers, those oh, I forget what they were called. The police for right down in that area. You know, those were our heroes that day. They went up the tower while people were trying to come out. They gave a semblance of calm and peace and hope to people as they risked their own lives. That's huge. We want to be like those people. I don't telling you to run into a burning building, but let's try to remember to put others before ourselves. Many of you know the Flight 93 story, and if you haven't been able to visit that memorial in Pennsylvania, it's not a long drive, friends, and it's definitely worth your trip. Jeremy Glick and Todd Beamer are two of the many people in that flight that gave their lives and saved countless others because we don't know exactly where that plane was going, but we knew they overtook it and they grounded it right here in Pennsylvania. Their final words were, "Let's roll." But before that, they took that time to pray. They prayed the Lord's Prayer. And that's something else we can learn from this, that even in the midst of situations that look and we know are not going to come out the way we want them to, we can take that time to pray. And one of my favorite heroes from 9/11, and I say favorite because I just think this embodies what it means to be a member of our military forces, was David Carnes. He was a Marine previously and was working in Connecticut at the time. And when he saw about the attacks, he got his head shaved. He put his Marine uniform on and he asked his co-workers to pray for him. He actually drove to his church and asked the pastor and the members to pray that God would lead him and anybody else down there to find the survivors. Because of his uniform, he was allowed into the ground zero area where he met up with Jason Thomas, another Marine. And as they were walking, they were yelling at the top of their lungs, "United States Marines, can you hear us?" And that's when they found the last two survivors. They were Port Authority police, that's what I was trying to think of earlier, and they were able to rescue two of the three officers who were trapped below the rubble. Those are true heroes. I don't see that we're walking in, as I said, to do this ourselves, but we certainly can find ways to do this in our world today. Where were you at 9/11 on that day? I was teaching fourth grade. One of my coworkers came down the hallway and said, "You need to check this out." And we didn't have TVs in our room at that time, so we pulled up our little internet to see what was going on. And I remember my husband sending me multiple text messages going, "This plane went into the towers," and all of that. Our superintendent at the time, Dr. Mack, was a half day that day, sorry, and he allowed us to stay and work or go home with our families. And I went home and met my husband there. We wanted to make sure that we met our children as they got off the school buses, and we wanted to be there for them. And I'll never forget when Christopher got off the school bus and he ran down and he was so worried that was going to die in a war. And what do you do with that? Well, we came to church. And I have to be honest, this church and this community was an anchor for my family at that time. And the pastors were meeting and from the ministerium, and they let Christopher make signs and put them on the end of town. And we had a prayer meeting that night up at Bethlehem United Methodist Church. And then the next Sunday, we had a prayer meeting at our church. And we started at one end of town and stopped at each church and picked up church members and brought them along. I'll never forget the story of my dad walking out on the steps of our church and having, "Oh my gosh, there's too many people." And they ran more bulletins and they got more candles for our candle lighting. Isn't that an awesome problem to have? There are too many people. That's the positive side when I reflect on September 11th. And this year I don't get to teach it to my fourth graders, which I have done so very proudly in the past. But this year at the daycare, thank you to the Dallas Town American Legion. They're donating flags to us, and the children are all getting American flags. And we're going to have our own little parade just in our private area here and remind us of what's important. And we'll have a special prayer and we'll say the Pledge of Allegiance. And even if the kids are too little to understand it, they're going to learn it slowly, step by step. We can take this moment in history and forget it and move on. Or we can take it and remember it and teach it to other generations. And remember that God was there that day and He's with us every day. How are you going to remember this coming Friday? I'd love to hear your stories. And just a reminder that in the Bible verse I shared with you, we can make good of every opportunity. Take care. I love you guys. God bless.